Welcome to History Love. In today's video, we're traveling to the heart of the American South to uncover the fascinating and often overlooked history of Mississippi. From its ancient Native American roots to its vital role in the American Civil War, Mississippi's story is rich and full of lessons. Let's dive into this incredible journey through time. Whispers beneath the mounds, the ancient heart of Mississippi. Long before the ink of history touched parchment, before names like Mississippi or America were ever spoken, a great and silent power pulsed through the land. As early as 9500 BC, hunter-gatherers drifted through the shadowy forests, trailing beasts lost to time, leaving behind only footprints and flint. Then, from the river-wrapped earth of the Delta, a new rhythm rose. Villages blossomed along natural levees, and the people began to sculpt the land itself into sacred mounds, sky-reaching altars of earth and belief. These Mississippian architects built cities of soil and spirit, tethered by trade to faraway lakes and oceans, ruled by celestial myths etched in clay and ritual. Tribes like the Choctaw and Chickasaw walked among gods in the form of nature, their legacy buried not just in memory, but in the land's very bones. But in 1540, the silence was broken. Steel and hoof thundered through the forests as Hernando de Soto's expedition carved a brutal path into the unknown. The old world had found the ancient heart of the new, and nothing would ever be the same. Empires and shadows, Mississippi's colonial crucible. Along the emerald shores of the Gulf, in the spring of 1699, the French carved a fragile outpost from the wilds, Fort Maurepas, the first European breath in what would become Mississippi. From there, Natchez rose by the river like a beacon of ambition, its walls echoing with trade, whispers of empire, and the beating hearts of 3 continents. Beneath fluttering flags, first French, then British, then Spanish, grew not just colonies, but a society tangled in power and blood. Enslaved Africans toiled in the fields, while a curious middle world emerged, the gens de couleur libres, born of secret pacts and tender betrayals, carrying both burden and brilliance in their veins. They became the artisans of a new social order, navigating between oppression and privilege. Each empire left its mark, Spain's hold on the coast, France's mounds of memory, Britain's stern control, until, with the ink of the Adams, Oni's Treaty, the land's fate shifted once more into American hands. Mississippi's soil remembers them all, free and enslaved, conqueror and captive, each woven into its story of empire, identity, and the restless tide of change. A land of broken promises, Mississippi's rise in shadows. After the smoke of revolution cleared, Mississippi became a promised land for a young United States, etched into maps with bold ambition, born from lands ceded by old colonies and expanded through tense negotiations with Spain. Yet beneath this surge of growth lay heartbreak and betrayal. Native American nations like the Choctaw stood on the front lines of vanishing homelands, pushed by treaties dressed as diplomacy, none more sorrowful than Dancing Rabbit Creek, where ancient ties to the soil were exchanged for uncertain futures in foreign lands. Those who stayed, stripped of tribal identity, became citizens of a nation that once sought their removal. Meanwhile, a darker tide flowed in from the east. Enslaved African Americans, ripped from families in the Upper South, forced into a brutal new chapter on the cotton-choked fields of Mississippi. The law claimed to offer protection, but behind every courtroom gesture was a system built on control, profit, and pain. Mississippi's rise was swift and unrelenting, but it came at the cost of cultures displaced, lives shattered, and a moral wound still healing in the soul of the South. Cotton and blood, the road to war. Mississippi, birthed from the ashes of ancient lands and the ambitions of a new nation, quickly found its identity steeped in the soil of slavery. As the 20th state, it bore the weight of unresolved tension, a fragile piece held together by the growth of cotton plantations that flourished in its fertile lands. Rivers and steamboats became the lifeblood of the economy, but beneath the surface, the cries of the displaced Choctaw and other Native American tribes echoed in the land, driven by the federal government's cruel push to remove them from their ancestral homes, forcing many onto the brutal trail of tears. By the 1850s, Mississippi was the very heart of the Cotton Kingdom, with vast fortunes built on the backs of enslaved African Americans. As wealth poured in, so did the growing political power of plantation owners, who, reliant on slavery, found themselves ever more entwined in the cause of secession. The state's population was divided, more than half enslaved, fewer than 1,000 free, but all lived under the shadow of an economy that was both powerful and morally fractured. As the specter of war loomed, Mississippi stood on the precipice, its fate sealed by the wealth and bloodshed of its past. Beneath the shadows, a state reborn in fire and blood. Mississippi, forged in the fires of secession, became a battleground for its soul. On January 9, 1861, it joined the Confederacy, an unwavering heart of the South, where the Mississippi River became the vital artery of war. The tides of history flowed through the blood of more than 80,000 Confederate soldiers and the 17,000 black Mississippians who served in the Union Army, each fighting for their vision of freedom. Yet, the end of the war did not bring peace, but instead a fractured state where Reconstruction sought to rebuild what had been broken. Black Mississippians, both freed and born free, took their place at the table of politics, shaping a new constitution in 1868, full of hope and promise, only to watch that promise slowly erode under the shadow of white supremacy. Violence surged as white paramilitary forces, fueled by the bitterness of lost control, systematically dismantled the fragile gains of black citizens, forcing them into a suffocating silence. The 1890s brought the final blow with a constitution crafted to strip the vote from black Mississippians, pushing them into a world where segregation, disenfranchisement, and terror reigned. Yet, despite the chains of oppression, the spirit of resistance never vanished as African American communities built their own churches, schools, and lives, quietly defying the darkness surrounding them. The land of Mississippi, forever scarred by the Civil War, would continue to bear witness to a struggle for dignity, equality, and justice, a fight that would echo for generations to come. A new dawn or a lasting struggle, Mississippi's journey from oppression to hope. In the 20th century, Mississippi stood at the crossroads of hope and despair, as the cycle of racial injustice perpetuated its harsh grip. By 1900, African Americans, once freed from the chains of slavery, found themselves battling a new form of oppression, one born from poverty, disenfranchisement, and violence. The Great Migration of the early 20th century saw tens of thousands fleeing northward in search of better lives, leaving behind a state beset by economic collapse, racial terror, and the failure of its cotton crops. But in the heart of this turmoil, black churches and music became lifelines, birthing the sounds that would resonate around the world, from blues to jazz, gospel to rock and roll. Yet, even as black Mississippians took their fight for civil rights to the streets, spurred by veterans returning from World War II, the state remained a fortress of white supremacy. The battle for equality would reach its most intense moments during the civil rights movement, where Mississippians, black and white, rallied against the entrenched systems of segregation. Despite the immense hurdles, Mississippi's fight for justice endured, as churches became the foundation for activism, and music echoed the resilience of a people determined to see a new day of equality. Even as the state's demographic changed and the soul-crushing weight of racial segregation began to be lifted, the story of Mississippi is one of continual struggle, a state forever etched in the battle for civil rights, self-determination, and the quest for freedom. The battle for justice and identity, Mississippi's struggle for freedom. In the summer of 1964, the heart of Mississippi pulsed with courage and defiance as students and activists from across the nation descended upon the state, determined to challenge its dark history of segregation and disenfranchisement. With bloodied hands and unwavering resolve, they fought against the violent opposition of the Ku Klux Klan and white supremacist forces, most notably in the brutal murders of Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner. But their sacrifice ignited a firestorm of change, culminating in the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The rise of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party and the first elected African American in the state legislature since Reconstruction were signals of a hard-fought victory, though deep-rooted racial tensions lingered. Mississippi, a state long steeped in segregation, finally turned a corner. Its churches slowly integrated, alcohol prohibition was lifted, and even the winds of nature couldn't silence its storm of transformation. Yet, in 1969, as Hurricane Camille tore through the coast, leaving devastation in its wake, Mississippi's true test was just beginning, a state torn between its painful past and its hopeful future. Mississippi's path to redemption, a legacy of change. For much of the 20th century, Mississippi remained shackled by the remnants of its oppressive past, with laws that enforced racial division and inequality. But in 1987, 2 decades after the Supreme Court struck down similar laws in Virginia, Mississippi finally repealed its ban on interracial marriage, a law that had been in place since 1890. The 1980s and 1990s saw more steps toward reconciliation, with the state lifting the poll tax in 1989 and symbolically ratifying the 13th Amendment in 1995, signifying its formal rejection of slavery. However, the state's road to healing was not without turmoil. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina, a storm of catastrophic proportions, ravaged the Gulf Coast, further deepening the state's struggles. Yet, the defining moment of change came in 2020, when Mississippi became the last state to remove the Confederate battle flag from its official emblem. The unveiling of the new Magnolia flag in 2021 marked a new chapter in Mississippi's ongoing journey, one of shedding the weight of history and embracing a future of inclusion and unity. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the history of Mississippi. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about the history of American states, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to hear your thoughts on Mississippi's history. What surprised you the most? Leave your comments below, and we'll see you in the next video for more historical stories from around the world.